Purushottam to call the president.
This meeting of Rotary Club of Madras East is called to order.
I may request the day chair also to take her seat on the dais, please. Archana Ramanakumar is our day chair today. May I request Rotarian Mahesh Pattabhiram to escort the chief guest, Dr. C. Rangarajan, to the stage. Can we all raise for the invocation song by Rotarian Sudarshan Ranganathan, please?
பாடினாள் ஒரு தமிழ் பாட்டு, பாடினாள் ஒரு தமிழ் பாட்டு, உள்ளம் பரவசமானேன் நான் அதை கேட்டு. பாடினாள் ஒரு தமிழ் பாட்டு, உள்ளம் பரவசமானேன் நான் அதை கேட்டு. பாடினாள் ஒரு தமிழ் பாட்டு. மாடும் பயிர்களுக்கு அன்பாலே, மாடும் பயிர்களுக்கு அன்பாலே, உயிர் வார்த்திடும் அமுதத்தேன் மாரியை போலே. வாடும் பயிர்களுக்கு அன்பாலே, உயிர் வார்த்திடும் அமுதத்தேன் மாரியை போலே. பாடினாள் ஒரு தமிழ் பாட்டு, உள்ளம் பரவசமானேன் நான் அதை கேட்டு. பாடினாள் ஒரு தமிழ் பாட்டு. காவியங்கள் பெருமை சொன்னாள், உயர் கவிஞர்களின் பிறப்பும் சொன்னாள். காவியங்கள் பெருமை சொன்னாள், உயர் கவிஞர்களின் பிறப்பும் சொன்னாள். ஓவியங்கள் திறனும் சொன்னாள் நமது, ஓவியங்கள் திறனும் சொன்னாள் நமது. உயிரினும் தமிழையே உயர்வென்று சொன்னாள். பாடினாள் ஒரு தமிழ் பாட்டு, உள்ளம் பரவசமானேன் நான் அதை கேட்டு. பாடினாள் ஒரு தமிழ் பாட்டு.
Thank you, Rotarian Sudarshan. May I request immediate past President Rotarian Srinivasa Rao to greet the guest with the fruit bouquet. May I request Rotarian Venkatesh to read the four-way test.
Good evening, friends. I take pleasure in reading the four-way test for this special Power Series meeting. The four-way test. First, is it the truth? Second, is it fair to all concerned? Third, will it build goodwill and better friendships? Fourth, will it be beneficial to all concerned? Thank you so much.
Now we'll have the President welcoming the gathering.
Good evening, everybody. Respected Dr. C. Rangarajan sir, former Governor, Reserve Bank of India, distinguished dignitaries and invitees, Rotary district officials, well-wishers of RCME, members from press and media, visiting Rotarians, my dear RCMEans, aunts and annettes. A very warm welcome to you all for our prestigious Power Speaker series of today. Dr. C. Rangarajan sir is an economist and former governor of Reserve Bank of India. Apart from that, he has also into academia. I think this makes him younger day by day by interacting with the youngsters. At the age of 91, sitting in his office before the time of our appointment in the morning by 10:30 a.m. makes him more energetic and shows age is only a number for all those who feels they have done enough even at the early ages. You are an inspiration to all of us in many aspects, sir. Thank you very much for accepting to come to our club and accepting to address us. This puts one more feather in our cap. A very warm welcome to you once again, sir. I think this is the first time you are coming to our club. I will take a minute to explain about our club. Rotary Club of Madras East is one of the respected and prestigious clubs in Chennai, chartered in the year 1985. Service above self is the motto of Rotary International. We at RCME follow it to the core. Today, with more than 183 members, it is the second largest club in this district in terms of contribution to Rotary International or in terms of service. We have very good committed members who come forward voluntarily for all the activities. RCME has always endured to take up impactful projects for the cause of humanity, be it in health, vocation, community development or environment in the past 37 years. So far, we have done projects worth of around 70 crores. Our projects have impacted more than 1 lakh lives. We at RCME look forward to continuation of good and sustainable projects. This is a small brief which I would like to explain about our club, Rotary Club of Madras East. Coming back, India has made significant progress in the last 75 years since its independence from British rule in 1947. India is the world's 5th largest economy by GDP and 3rd largest by purchasing power parity. The country has been able to diversify its economy, reduce poverty and create more jobs. In the early decades after independence, India persuaded to a socialist economic model with significant state control over the economy. Despite this, India saw a period of rapid economic growth. Subsequently, India launched a series of economic reforms that further liberalized the economy and opened it up to foreign investments. This led to a period of rapid economic growth. India has made significant investments in infrastructure development in the past few decades, like roads, highways, airports, etc., which has boosted the economic growth. India is the world's 2nd largest producer of food and has made significant progress in improving agricultural productivity. Here I would like to mention, sir, Dr. M.S. Swaminathan, who is the main architect of Green Revolution in India, is our honorary member. And we are very proud and happy to say that. Life expectancy has increased and infant mortality rates have decreased. India also has emerged as a major player in global health industry, which was evident from latest COVID vaccination supply to many countries. Improvement in literacy rates by providing access to education, space technology, and even Mars mission. India has a vibrant and active democracy that has withstood the test of time. Since independence, India has maintained a stable political environment. Overall, India has made significant strides in the past 75 years in various areas of development. However, there are still significant challenges the country need to be addressed. Let us hear more from our speaker on how it is going to be beyond 75. With these few words, I welcome you all for today's meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, President. Now, Rotarian Murari will brief us about the Power Series speakers.
Respected Chief Guest, Mr. President, Secretary, ladies and gentlemen, one of the stated purposes of Rotary International is to bring together business and professional leaders to provide humanitarian service and to advance goodwill and peace around the world. Rotary Club of Madras East has always been in the forefront of engaging with its members to identify ways to acknowledge their contribution to the community. One of those ways was through knowledge-sharing business conclaves. On the basis of the positive feedback we received, a decision was taken to formalize this process through the Power Speaker Series, where thought leaders were requested to share their thoughts to enrich the knowledge of our members. The Power Speaker Series is based on the concept of Level 5 leadership envisaged in the book Good to Great by Jim Collins, where a Level 5 leader is described as a person who channels his or her ego needs away from himself or herself and into the larger goal of building a great organization. In other words, a person who builds enduring greatness through a blend of personal humility and professional will. RCME has been particularly fortunate over the years to have had a galaxy of such leaders share their journeys and experiences with it. Eminent speakers over the years include Mr. T.V. Narendran, Managing Director of Tata Steel, Mr. Bhaskar Bhatt, Managing Director of Titan Industries, Mr. Shivakumar, Group President of the Aditya Birla Group, Mr. Girish Mathrubhutam, CEO and founder of Freshworks, Dr. Velumini of Thyrocare, Mr. R. Seshasai, former Managing Director of Ashok Leyland, Mr. Venki Rajagopal, founder of Indian Terrain, Mr. Ambi Parmeswaran, founder of brandbuilding.com, Mr. Haresh Ramachandran, Director TVS, Mr. Sunil Sood, Director of Vodafone, Mr. Sridhar Vembu, founder and CEO of Zoho Corporation, and Mr. B. Santanam, CEO of Sangoban, Asia Pacific and India region. It is a proud privilege to be able to add the name of today's eminent chief guest to this list. Thank you.
Thank you, Murariji. Now, Mr. Jayadev Iyer will be introducing the chief guest formally to us.
Padma Vibhushan Dr. Chakravarti Rangarajan is an Indian economist, a former member of the Rajya Sabha, ex-governor of Andhra Pradesh, and not least, the 19th governor of the Reserve Bank of India. He includes in his bio former president of the Indian Statistical Institute, founding chairman of the C.R. Rao Advanced Institute of Mathematics, Statistics and Computer Science, chairman of the Prime Minister's Economic Advisory Council, and a whole slew of highly noteworthy lifetime achievement awards and committee chairmanships, a list that would be too long for me to enumerate here today. I was a young banker in Bombay, and I reminded Dr. Rangarajan of how I knew him then, when Dr. Rangarajan was already Deputy Governor of the Reserve Bank of India in the 80s. We, of course, held him in awe. We spoke in hushed tones. And even while it is my privilege to stand here and introduce him to you today, I will cry foul, because a person like him and a career such as his does not lend itself to description in the few short minutes afforded to me today. I'm nevertheless sure that at the broadest level, he does not need very much introduction. Dr. Rangarajan went to National College Trichy en route to graduating from Loyola College Madras in Commerce. He received his PhD in economics from the University of Pennsylvania in 1964. Interestingly, his thesis was titled Variability of Demand Deposits And we were talking briefly about the fate of Silicon Valley Bank this week and the current brouhaha in global banking. And I'm sure his PhD thesis from then probably has much relevance even today. Dr. Rangarajan has taught at several institutions, including UPenn, the Indian Institute of Management at Ahmedabad. He served as a Deputy Governor of the Reserve Bank of India from 1982 to 91, and as one of its most celebrated governors between December 1992 and December 1997. He was governor of Andhra Pradesh from 97 to 2003, and I was remarking to him that one of his firsts might also be that at that time, or at least some years during that time, he held additional charge as governor of Odisha from 1998 to 1999, governor of Tamil Nadu from 2001 to 2002, and briefly, I think, also governor of Kerala, at least on an interim basis. He was then chairman of the 12th Finance Commission. In 2002, the government of India awarded him the Padma Vibhushan. Fast forwarding to the present, Dr. Rangarajan is chairman of the Madras School of Economics. He has worked with the Tamil Nadu government, chairing a high-level committee to advise on medium-term responses to the COVID-19 lockdown. He continues to have academic connections with some of the most prestigious schools in the world in the fields of economics and statistics, including Wharton, NYU, IMA, and the Indian Statistical Institute. We have contextualized Dr. Rangarajan's presence here today around India at 75 and beyond. Undoubtedly, that references socioeconomic, demographic, and geopolitical agendas and drivers. I myself cannot think of someone more suited to represent this as power speaker to us than this eminent personality who for decades has been respected, admired, and accredited as a great economist and central banker, has catalyzed exceptionally strong governance and macroprudential regulation, has driven path-breaking academic work, nurturing many great current minds in turn, has propounded and shaped grassroots-level economics and economic edifices, and has managed the definition, design, and implementation of a wide range of across-the-board reforms set in a truly overarching and nationalistic perspective. For more, please do read his current book, 4 months out in the press, Penguins, Forks in the Road, My Days at RBI and Beyond. Ladies and gentlemen, for on behalf of the Rotary Club of Madras East, it's my privilege and pleasure to introduce Dr. C. Rangarajan.
Thank you, Mr. Jaydev. I invite the chief guest, respected Dr. C. Rangarajan, former governor of RBI, to address us, the moment that we have all been eagerly waiting for. Welcome, sir.
President Ravi Kumar and friends, I am delighted to be with you this evening and to be talking to you about India at 75 and beyond. Rotary clubs are important not only for the exchange of ideas and thoughts, but also for the deep interest that they have taken in socially related areas. I think that aspect of the work of the Rotary Club, to which a reference was made a little while ago, is extremely important. And I do hope that this model is emulated by other organizations. India's economic journey really started after independence. It is not realized by many that the British rule in the first half of the 20th century, that is between 1900 and 1950, was dismal. India's economic growth, annual economic growth, during these 5 decades was 0.89%. That is less than 1% was the annual rate of growth. During that period, India's population was growing at an annual rate of 0.84%. with the result that the per capita income of the country did not grow at all or grow very lightly. You may be surprised to note that India's population was growing only at 0.84% per annum. That was because of a high birth rate followed by a high death rate, and that resulted in the net population growth of less than 1%. Therefore, it was natural that immediately after independence, the major concern of the policymakers was to accelerate growth. What then is to be done? The dominant thinking in the economic literature in the 50s and 60s was that state had an important role to play, and that state must undertake activities to correct what economists usually describe market failure. Market failure essentially means the inability of markets to perform their function. And this market failure was particularly noted in the area of allocation of resources over time, and that is investment. Because of the myopic character of the participants. Just imagine 1947, the kind of political situation that prevailed. How many could look forward and say that India's economy would grow fast? And therefore, of the limited view that the investors and others took, it was felt that the government had an important role to play and that it must undertake activities, particularly in the area of investment. And at that time, there was also another thought, and that was initiating a set of coordinated investment decisions will result in faster rate of growth. If you want the steel industry to grow, you must also allow the power industry to grow. You must also, some other industries which provide the inputs to the steel industry must also grow. So this led to nationwide economic planning, not only in India, but in many other parts of the developing world. The result of this was a strategy of development that was adopted. And there were 4 elements which constituted in the strategy of development. The first element was that to raise the savings and investment rate. It was felt that unless investment is raised, for which savings are required, the economy will not grow fast. The development economics was at an early stage at that time. Therefore, much of economics at that time was concerned with crisis management and stability, rather than with a faster rate of economic growth. For example, Arthur Lewis, who got a Nobel Prize in economics much later, said the central problem of development is to understand how a country which saves 5% of its income becomes a country which saves 20% of its income. So what leads to this rise in the savings rate? And then there was the famous theories of Herod and Domar, which highlighted the point, which is very common now, which is common saying now, but very critically put forward, analytically put forward by both Herod and Domar, that investment is a driving force of economic growth. And that resulted in the simple equation which is called G is equal to S over V, which meant that the growth rate of an economy is influenced by 2 things. One is the investment rate, and the other is what we call the incremental capital output ratio, ICOR, which is it called. The investment rate divided by ICOR gives you the growth rate. ICOR can be defined as the units of capital that is required to produce 1 unit of output. Let us say if the economy invests 20% of its income, GDP, and if the incremental capital output ratio is 4:1, then that economy will grow at 5%. 20% is what you invest, and that means that for 4 units of investment, you will get 1 unit of output, and therefore the rate of growth of the economy will be 5%. There are modifications and what are the lags involved and so on and so forth. But strictly speaking, the two important elements that determine the growth rate was this. And if you look at all our 5-year plans earlier, they all went along these lines, namely, what is the investment rate during the 5-year period, and what will be the incremental capital output ratio. But the incremental capital output ratio is driven by a number of factors. One is technology. Technology is very important in determining what the ICOR will be. And the second aspect of that is that it depends upon the efficiency with which you use capital and labor. So ICOR is a summary term implying what technology is available and what also with what efficiency you are using capital and labor. So the first element, to raise the investment rate and drive the growth through that investment. The second was the one that I mentioned already, the dominant of the state role. And the third is the import substitution. What they felt at that time was, we are importing goods, why can't we make those goods in India? And therefore, import substitution as an important element. But what was forgotten at that time was, import substitution is not that easy. Because the capital intensity of import substitution is even much higher than producing other goods. Followed by that is also another principle. While India sought industrialization, but they also thought in terms of industrialization with an emphasis on what we used to call in India heavy industry. That is, machine-making industry. You see that in a closed economy, that is a complete answer. In a closed economy, which means, assume for a moment, there are no exports and imports. Then if you really want the investment to happen, then you naturally have to produce the machines which will produce the machines and so on. And the intellectual support for that came from the Mahalanobis model. And the Mahalanobis model showed why a faster rate of growth will be achieved in the situation in which there's an emphasis on industrialization with an emphasis on heavy industry. But many people ignore the fact that the Mahalanobis model, which is a mathematical model, is strictly applicable only if you assume a closed economy. The alternative to this is the South Korean model. South Korea, I also need to point out to you, in 1950, the per capita income of South Korea was exactly equal to the per capita income of India. You all know where South Korea is now in terms of per capita income. It is one of those Asian countries which is part of the developed world. It's a developed economy. Now, to come back, the point really is that you can export consumer goods, use those resources to import the capital goods. That's possible. But that, of course, is ruled out in a closed economy. But at that time, many people in India assumed what is called the elasticity pessimism. which is that the prospects of exports are not high, and therefore we can assume a closed economy. But the net result of this was we became a high-cost economy. And India's share in world exports in 1947 was 2%. And India's share in world exports came down to less than half of 1% by 1970 because we became a higher cost economy and could not export. But coming back, we cannot blame the policymakers at that time. There was no clear theory or analytics at that particular point to indicate precisely the route that a developing country should take in order to achieve a higher rate of growth. At that time, the one country in the world that had grown fast in 3 decades was Soviet Union. That is, it was able to fight a Second World War within 30 years of becoming of shifting to a new model of growth. And therefore, there was some attraction to that particular model. That by 1970s, I suppose, we must have known that our model, as was pointed out by the previous speaker, is achieved many things, but at the same time, it fell short of many expectations. And the famous Deng's speech in China was made on 13th December 1978. And in that speech, he said, he asked for the thing, explore new ways and generate new ideas. These are the 2 words that Deng used. And as I said, once again, even with respect to China, our per capita income, it is interesting to note that in 1980, in current dollars, India's per capita income was 266, while that of China was, just imagine, 194. In fact, India's per capita income was higher than the China's per capita income. In 2020, India's is $1,900, while that of China is $10,500. Of course, one cannot attribute everything to the strategy of development, but I will come back a little later as to what can be done and what should be done, in my view. So, the 1970s, things were changing. But the real problem came in the 1980s. I cannot spend that much time on that today, but I will very quickly pass over that. But then by the end of 1980s and in the 1990 and 1991, we faced an acute economic crisis. And it's a balance of payments problem that triggered the crisis, but the problems were even more fundamental. So the 1991-92 reforms, of which I had the privilege of being part of it, made a break with the past in 3 important ways. One is to dismantle the complex system of controls, permits, and licenses and move away from it. Second is to redefine the role of the state. And third, give up the import substitution strategy and adopt globally the globalization process and be willing to compete in the world. Now let's go back a little bit on performance of the economy in the 75 years, and then we can come to say what lies ahead. Between till the end of 1970s, India's average per capita income growth was 3.6%. And the population was growing at 2.2%. Please remember what the first five decades I said, 0.84%, 2.2%. Because The birth rate was high, but the death rate was brought down so substantially that the net result is 2.2%. And therefore, the per capita income grew in this period at 1.4%. So, therefore, the problem before the policymakers is how to accelerate economic growth. Many things were said about what we have achieved, and these are things that we should really be conscious of and should also be proud of, because we really changed the picture in many ways. For example, after the Green Revolution, the emergence of self-sufficiency with respect to food grains is an important development. And similarly, we had a wide diversification of the industrial structure in the country. The literacy rate went up. Women entering schools and colleges went up. So there are many significant things that happened. But what also happened was that it fell short of our expectations. All our growth rate models, all our planning models wanted a rate of growth of 5% per annum. As I said earlier, up to end of 1970s, it was only 3.3%. So therefore it fell short of what our own aspirations. And it fell short of what some other countries, which were also in the developing stage, could do. I gave you the example of South Korea. We can give the example of Thailand. We can give some other countries as well, which did better. So, in some sense, the reforms were an answer to that problem. The reforms do not mean that the state does not have a role to play. I think that is a wrong interpretation of the reforms. What the role of the state is and got redefined, I think that is the most important way to say. In some areas, the role of the government expanded. In some areas, the role of the government contracted. In the area of both social and physical infrastructure, the role of the government has only increased. As somebody put it, more market does not mean less government, but different government. And that is the real principle behind the reforms. If you look at the rate of growth of the economy in the post-reform period, in the first period from 92 to 2000 and 2001, the rate of growth was 6.2%. In the second period, up to the end of 2013, it was 7.4%. And the following period, up to the 2019-20, is something like 6.7%. So the rate of growth of the economy definitely improved. And of course, the best performance of the economy was between 2005-06 and 2010-11, with the exception of 2008-9, where the international financial crisis. But even if you include that year, the average annual rate of growth of the economy was between 8 and 9%. Between 2005-06 and 2007-08, the average annual rate of growth of the economy was in excess of 9%. For 3 years, we continued to grow at a rate higher than 9%. Now, the most important thing is the fixed capital formation rate. The word investment rate is a popular term, and I think one can use it, but there is a distinction between investment rate and the gross fixed capital formation rate, and I prefer to use the term gross fixed capital formation rate. And the gross fixed capital formation rate touched something like 39% in 2007-08. Just look at 39.1% divided by 4, you just exactly get the 9.5%, which was the rate of growth in the economy at that time. So then what happened? 2011-12, and the economy started sliding. And the fixed capital formation rate also came down. The last year of that, I think that the 2015-16, 2012-13, the rate of growth of the economy was 4.5%, which has been revised upwards now to 5.5%. If reforms would lead to growth, the question that we have to answer is, why did the economy slide from 2011-12? There are many reasons, and there are long articles written, and one from me is also coming out very shortly. But the point really is that it is partly cyclical. If you look at capitalism as a system, always it happens. It rises from one level to another level, reaches a peak, then the capacity utilization at its maximum, the full potential of the economy has been used up, then it starts sliding, the recession, and if it becomes deeper, then it touches a bottom and then it climbs up. So in some sense, it is it. So somebody asked the question, what is the difference between recession and depression? And the answer was, he said, if your neighbor is unemployed, it is recession. And if you are unemployed, it is depression. So it is the intensity of the decline which determines what is recession and what is depression. But the point really is that the economy actually hit the ceiling. And to use the word of Hicks, it is creeping on the ceiling and then it comes down. Then there are other reasons. One thing, I think we all talk about even today about what happened to credit boom and so on. Exactly happened here too. Between 2005-06 and 2009-10, the rate of growth of credit in this country was far in excess of the nominal income rate of growth. It's almost 20% for about 4 or 5 years. Now that is not sustainable, and it will have to come down. But then what happens? Once the economy starts sliding, projects which were identified earlier as viable and acceptable become unviable and unacceptable. So that is how the NPAs start accumulating. It is not that originally it was thought of as an NPA. There could have been some cases also like that, but largely it is not that. It was at the time when the economy was booming at the rate of 9% per annum. Everything looked rosy, and therefore all projects became acceptable to the bankers, and that created the problems. Let me very quickly come to the post 2011, 12, 13. What has happened is that subsequent to it, we have a problem in statistics. The way in which we measure national income was changed in 2011-12. It came a new base on which the national income was calculated. And there have been a lot of arguments about the validity of the new set of national income data. In fact, surprisingly, you will see that even in the year in which the 2016-17 demonetization happened, the new series estimates the national income at 8%. So there have been a lot of exchange among the statisticians as to whether this is appropriate or not. The problem is really that there are reasons to say why these may be overestimates. but there is no way of saying or determining by how much, by anybody outside the statistics department. I mean, I think they only have the data. Nobody else can say that how high, how much of an overestimate it is. But anyway, leave it at that. I mean, I think there is it's some years since that, and therefore maybe we can work now on a different base and look at the national income growth at that point, from that angle. Now, the point really is that then came COVID. In 2020-21, the income growth rate fell, which is 8.6% earlier, then rose 8.7%, 6.6%, 8.7% in the next year. But now, about a month ago, the Statistics Office has revised the numbers, and the fall is now recorded as 5.5% in 2021, and the rise in the 21-22 is 9.1%. So that, in fact, I have written an article today, which you might have seen, some of you, on what the net situation as a consequence of the change in numbers. Now let's come very quickly. I mean, I think the expectation for this year, 22-23, is 7%. I believe that it might happen. I mean, I think the third quarter number is not that encouraging, but in order to get a 7% rate of growth in the current year, 22-23, in quarter 4, we need to grow by 5.1%, because there was a big jump in the second quarter. So we have 5.1%. I believe that it is possible, and the high frequency indicators do indicate that. And what about next year, 23-24? That IMF says it is 6.1%. Reserve Bank of India says these are all projections, 6.4% and so on. Well, they are in some band of 6.1 to 6.4. And I have in today's article indicated under what circumstances it could be 6.1 and under what circumstances it can be 6.4. So in a sense, that is where we stand. Very briefly, let us jump now to see what the next 25 years could be. There are some people who might criticize me after listening to this and said, is the economy only about growth? Is there not something else? Yes, one of the most important things is how is this growth shared? Who benefits? Who are the beneficiaries of the growth? Now, I must tell you once again that people compute what are called inequality coefficients. That is, how much is the inequality? There are different ways of doing it. The Gini coefficient, which is calculated, finds out what percentage of the people share what percentage of income. I have taken a position, which is explained in my book, recent book also, that we look at the poverty ratio. That's better rather than looking at the inequality coefficient. Theoretically, it can be shown that the poverty ratio may come down, but the inequality may rise. Intuitively, you can see that. Therefore, you will find that the poverty ratio fell from 45.3% in 93-94 to 37.2% in 2004-05, and to 2011-12, 21.9%. Therefore, there was a sharp reduction in it. Now, this is based upon what is called the Tendulkar methodology. In fact, when it was shown as 21.9%, some people started saying that, this is unbelievable. Then a committee was appointed under my chairmanship to look into the whole problem. So we have modified that number a little bit, but the point really is that during the period of high growth rate, the poverty ratio did come down. That was a period during which we essentially introduce many social safety nets. The Rural Employment Guarantee Scheme was introduced at that time. The extended food security system was introduced at that time. Therefore, if the economy is really growing at a faster rate, it is possible for the government to raise the resources to provide the social safety nets. Therefore, reforms may lead to growth, and I will come to that point. And growth by itself will not solve the problem. Growth has to be accompanied by a commitment to really take care and provide the social safety nets. But to argue about social safety nets without growth doesn't make any sense, because you will not be able to introduce those social safety nets unless the economy is growing. So, as I have written somewhere, reforms, growth, and equity constitute the triad of economic policy. That is the way in which we really need to proceed. The reforms create a climate for larger investment. That will create the situation for faster growth, and faster growth must be accompanied by providing for the social safety nets. Let me take another 5 minutes. Is that right? What are the lessons we have learned from the reform experience? As I told you earlier, the reforms did result in higher rate of growth. See, and what we really need to do now is identify sectors of the economy which really need reforms, where reforms can lead to improved economic efficiency. Probably power, financial system, government administration, even agricultural marketing, all of them need reforms. And these reforms can result in improved efficiency and productivity of the system. The second is the state and center should work together in introducing reforms. Thirdly, under the shadow of a crisis in 1991, we were able to push through many reforms. That is no longer possible. Therefore, continuous discussion and a consensus building must be part of the reform process. And as I said a little while ago, reforms are not ends in themselves. Reforms are not just for the sake of reforms. Reforms must lead to growth, and growth must lead to equity, and that is what I mentioned earlier as the need of the hour. I always say that growth and equity are the two legs on which the economy must walk. If we ignore any one of the legs, the economy can only limp along. And that is really the lesson that we have to bear in mind. So what are the challenges and opportunities before us in the next 25 years? Very quickly, we thought post-COVID we will have a normal year. But that hope was shattered by the Russian-Ukraine war. The present hope is 23-24 will be normal year. But the point really is that we really need to raise the investment rate. The investment rate has fallen from the peak in 2007-8. So raising the investment rate from the present level of 28 to 29% to something like 33% is essential. And if you retain, or if you work towards an incremental capital output ratio of 4, then it will give us something in the range of 7 to 8%. Do we need 78% rate of growth? Is it possible to have a 78% rate of growth in the changing world in which we are now living? These are questions to which I shall presently come. But raising the investment rate is critical. And and investment climate have to be nurtured and protected. And investment is the result of what Keynes used to say, animal spirits. And the animal spirits are also dependent both on economic and non-economic factors. Public investment has risen. In fact, even the jump in the investment rate in the last 2 years, 3 years, has been because of the rise in capital expenditure of the government. We need to raise the private investment, both corporate and non-corporate. And for that, a stable fiscal and financial system is required. Another big issue is absorbing new technologies. If you look at India and look at the industrial map of India, this is a country in which technologies of different generations coexist. We have maybe plows still tilling the land. We are also making pots with the hand, and we are also making pots with the finest machinery, and so on. Therefore, but there is a new change that is coming and a new technology that is coming, which is going to become somewhat of a problem, and we really need to handle it. The new technologies, including artificial intelligence, can really improve productivity. But will improving productivity result in more jobs? That's a big question that we have to address. There are some countries in the West now today who are experimenting with 4-day week rather than 5-day week. Belgium has already introduced that. But then what really requires is that you will have to create a lot more social safety nets if that kind of a situation arises and the employment opportunities does not coincide with an expansion in the use of technology. The strategy of development cannot be unidimensional. I mentioned earlier about South Korea and India and so on. Yes, an export-oriented strategy of development helped South Korea, Thailand, and others. But the situation has changed. We cannot, a large country like India, cannot work on the basis of a single strategy or a unidimensional strategy of development. We need strong manufacturing, we need strong agriculture, and we need strong exports. Strong exports are an indicator of the efficiency of the system. A country can export only if it is efficient. And therefore, exports and promoting exports is important. But at the same time, as I said, all the other elements of the manufacturing is important, because manufacturing provides today an employment profile which is much more widespread than, let us say, some of the high-tech technologies, high-tech oriented industries. Therefore, we cannot work on a unidimensional strategy of development. In terms of the threats or in terms of risks that we face, one is technology. The second is the global scene in which the developed countries are facing a new problem. OECD has in fact projected a secular trend of lower growth for the developed countries. So that means the export opportunities of developing countries are going to be difficult unless the developing countries themselves grow fast enough to support each other. So that is the other problem. And the two other elements is those who taught us and those who spoke to us and lectured to us on the importance of free trade are now retreating. So the whole idea of what will happen to the global trade is we will have a bearing. But I do hope good sense will prevail and people will realize that retreating to your older philosophy will not be good. But the Russian-Ukraine war has also shown two things. Extreme dependence on an input which is required, which is universally required, which is called universal intermediate as it is called, then real problem comes in. And also dependence on one country or one group of countries also can become a problem. So we really need to take care of that. And finally, the question is of environmental issues that are coming up. That is where I raised that question, whether 78% rate of growth is possible at all in a world in which we have really to take action in order to probably reduce growth, in order to reduce emissions, in order to take care of certain other problems. So in the terms of the risks and in terms of the developments that may pose problems to us, one is technology, one is the approach to trade, and the other is the nature of technology. Let me conclude. We are all happy that India is the 5th largest economy. And another number was also given. Based on purchasing power parity exchange rate, we are even higher, 2nd largest economy. We can be proud of it and we should be proud of it. But that is not the whole story. In terms of per capita income, India ranks 142 out of 197 countries. Therefore, the critical thing is, where do we stand in terms of per capita income? We want to become a developed country. We want to become a developed country in 25 years from now. That is 2047, when we complete 100 years. What is a developed country? The countries are classified into developed countries, middle income countries, upper middle income, lower middle income, and the last category. They are all based upon per capita income. A country is classified as a developed country when its per capita income is $13,000. Our per capita income now is $2,000. So if you want to become a developed country by 2047, our per capita income will have to grow from $2,000 to $13,000. Arithmetic shows, or calculations show, that it requires a rate of growth of about 7% per annum for the next 25 years. I will not underestimate the calculations involved in it, because these are all in nominal terms. It depends upon the exchange rate and what the definition of a developed country will be 25 years from now. Today I am saying that $13,000 is a developed country. There could be some change in that also. But to summarize only, I say that we have a big task before us. If we really want to become a developed country by 2047, we must gear up our rate of growth. Continuously we need to grow. Let us put it somewhat at 7% per annum for the years. And the only way in which we can do it is, once again I go back to the same fundamental principle, that we need to raise our investment rate of growth to somewhere about 33% of the GDP. It is only by raising the investment rate and by improving the efficiency with which we use capital and labor. Two things are needed: raising the investment rate and using the capital and labor with great efficiency. then we can achieve that. Therefore, here is a case of running fast or running faster. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir, for precisely summarizing India at 75 and sharing your valuable thoughts on India beyond 75. Thank you for your enlightening talk today with us and sharing your time with us today. Now we can move on to the Q&A session being moderated by the day chair, Rotarian Archana Ramanakumar.
Thank you, sir. I think most of the questions that I had prepared has already been answered, but certainly it's worth validating some of these. I think one of the first few questions, which is what you nicely summarized, is among many economic indicators like inflation, interest rates, cash ratio, currency, and government pressures and interference that the central bank of a country needs to manage, which are the basic one or two levers that are key indicators to monitor and control?
What's the question?
Among the many economic indicators, what are the two key indicators, if you may have to summarize, that we will monitor and control?
No, I think it depends upon the regulators and it depends upon the policy makers on which to focus. But find the final analysis, what we are really looking for is a faster rate of economic growth and a higher level of per capita income. Now, growth is possible only when there is a stability in the system. And that is why when we talk of sustained rate of growth of the economy, we really need to look at the stability parameters. And the stability parameters is, as far as the government is concerned, is fiscal deficit. And as far as the central bank and others are concerned, is a reasonable level of price stability. So therefore, from the stability point of view, you monitor the price situation, price stability, and the fiscal deficit. And the objective or the goal you have in mind is in terms of per capita income and the growth rate.
Thank you, sir. The next one is around the recent import policy around the INR. Is the news about the trade payment in INR with 8 countries something to rejoice? How does this help the economy and globally our currency strength against USD or Euro?
I'm sorry, you export? No.
Import, the trade payment in Indian rupees.
Right, yes, yeah.
Is that something to rejoice?
Well, I don't know. We have a history of this. I mean, it's not as if that we are writing on clean slate. We had the rupee payments agreement with the Soviet Union and on the so-called East European countries. And it all depends upon, unless there is a certain amount of complementarity in the relationship, that it can lead to an accumulation of rupees. Because we were able to export to Russia, and therefore Russia had a positive account. But we could not import anything from Russia. Now it is the other way around at the present moment. We are able to import from Russia the oil, and therefore in order for that to continue, there must be a certain system, a certain situation in which there are enough exports and enough imports to and from the countries. If not necessarily from the 2 countries, but you can have 4 or 5 countries in which the complementarity relationship is there. But that doesn't work always. I mean, but in the immediate situation, something can be done. That's all.
Okay. Thank you, sir. The next one is related to the bank deposit rates. The banks have increased the deposit rates by over 250 BPS. Is this to help the banks to lend more money or to make good of the bad loans?
No, the second part, make good
Lend, is it to help the bank to lend more money or to make good of the bad loans?
No, I think the make good of the bad loans essentially comes after making profits. I mean, I think the bad loans have already happened. Actually, when people talk about the fact that the NPAs have come down because the banks have written off the bad loans. Now, you can write off the bad loans only if you make enough profits. Therefore, they are not conflicting. The idea is to make profits, and if you cannot recover the money from the people, then you write it off. That's it. Therefore, the idea of raising the interest rate on deposits is not directly to say to lend more, because it is only indirect in the sense because of the rise in the rate of interest, people will keep more deposits, and therefore more deposits will enable them to lend. But there are other people who argue because the rate of interest has gone up, the demand for loans goes down. Therefore, it is not a straight answer.
Will it bring down the inflation?
Yeah?
Will it bring down the inflation?
I think it will, because I saw an article today also by my friend in the Times of India, but the point really is that the people do not quite understand this whole mechanism. Why do one person, somebody is asking the question, why do you raise the rate of interest when you want to control prices? This is what we normally do. And the argument is that if the inflation is because of inadequate supply, then what happens if you raise the rate of interest? Then it is not an answer to the problem, because if it is because of supply inadequacies, you should actually increase output, and therefore you should not raise the rate of interest. This is convoluted logic. This is not correct. The point really is that, yes, what happened in India and what happened in the US and what happened in the UK. You have 3 countries in which the inflation rate is high. In the United States, it's almost 8%, and they never heard of an inflation of that type. Their normal inflation is 2%. At least we are accustomed to somewhat a higher level of inflation. And in UK, again, they're very high. What happened? I think if you look at it, in COVID-19, when the problems were there, what was the advice given to the government? The advice given to the government by every economist was spend more. People are don't have the resources, so spend more. Spend more when? When the revenues are falling. So what will happen as a consequence? It is very clear that it can lead only to inflation. There is no other possibility. And that is why, whether it is UK or USA or India, everywhere inflation has come. Because when you spend money, then when the government increases its expenditure, then it has to borrow more because revenues are not adequate. Now, how do you borrow more? The savings in the system is not adequate. Finally, the central bank has to come in and provide some help. And therefore, through various liquidity measures and so on and so forth, they gave the support. But that appeared to be the right policy at that time. And then as a consequence of it, what? The reserve money increased. Even though the money supply did not increase as fast, it certainly did increase at a time when output was falling. Therefore, the question really is that we go back to the old definition of inflation, too much money chasing too few goods. That's it. That's the answer.
Thank you, sir. As an economist, your read on the Hindenburg report, on the large Indian corporate house recently?
Which one?
The Heidenberg report.
I have not read the report. I mean, I think I think, I don't know, is it in public domain? I don't know, but I have not read it. But what is your question?
No, any personal views?
I think I don't have it.
Maybe a last question. Again, this is regarding the recent SVB collapse in the American banking side. What would be your advice to SMEs or startups to effectively manage their businesses from these unprecedented financial crises?
No, I think when the startups become the main source for one bank, I think this really goes against the diversity principle. I mean, I think you're putting all eggs, the bank is putting all eggs in one basket, and that is really the problem. That is why we say that you need to have a diversified portfolio. This is what Markowitz taught long time ago, and therefore we really need to ensure that. But therefore neither the regulator nor the bank itself, from its own point of view, could have corrected this. But somehow, when success breeds optimism, I think this is over years the startups have been doing well, and the economy was also doing well, and so on, and therefore it seemed to be a right path to take. But on a fundamental basis, that concentrating in one region, concentrating in one industry, concentrating in one type of activity which bears risk in one direction, I think this is not the right thing to do.
Thank you, sir.
You said growth in population is resulted in growth in economy in the earlier stages. Do you think that still holds good now also?
Floating population?
Growth.
Yeah.
Growth in the population ratio has resulted in the growth in the economy as well.
I don't know. I mean, I think it is growth up to a particular point in population is certainly helps growth. But growth of population beyond a particular point is not necessarily a stimulant of growth. I mean, I think this is therefore there is a limit beyond which it doesn't satisfy. For example, I was talking about this advanced technology and so on. The only country in the world which welcomes this advanced technology is Japan, because its population is falling. That is the only country in the world where the population is falling, and they find it very comfortable to use this modern technology. But the other people, I think we really have to moderate the population growth. In fact, even though I said about the fifth largest economy, please don't mistake, I think it's a good achievement. What has really happened? If we had controlled the population at that particular point earlier, then the output growth was there, and it is not because the population was high, it is because of other factors. And if the population has been controlled, our per capita income would have been much higher than what we are talking about today. Therefore, population is good. I mean, I think a declining population is not a good thing. But the rate of growth of population has to be moderated.
So I think it plays a vital role in making our economy a developed economy in the next 25 years.
I don't know. I think we really need to have the population growth coming down. But that calculations also indicate a very different thing. That while India's fertility rate has come down to 2.2, which is a shade above 2.1, which is the stable population. But the population in India will stabilize only in 2050. Population of India will continue to grow even after touching fertility rate of 2.1 because the rate of growth of population does not depend upon the fertility rate alone. It also depends upon the number of women entering the reproductive age because of the earlier increase in population. So the calculations show that 1.5 billion population by 2050, and that is when it will stabilize.
Any other questions from the audience?
As you know, Dr. Rangarajan, I came back into the Indian economy recently.
Yeah.
There's a lot of talk and confusion about concepts like coupling and decoupling, whether you talk about the Indian economy or inflation or trade or banking problems. I think people here want to choose coupling when it's sort of sounds good for us and talk about decoupling when problems seem to be overseas. What is your view on coupling and decoupling?
I think if by coupling one is talking about, in a sense, globalization, I think that is desirable. When decoupling becomes essential, when the economies are not doing well and you want to do better than what the rest of the world is doing. Therefore, in terms of philosophy, I believe that an integrated world is a good thing. And we really should move towards the integrated world, and we should be part of the world trade. We should be in a position to compete and be there. But the point really is, what I mentioned earlier, some people having lectured to us earlier now are thinking in different terms, and that is not a desirable thing. In fact, they have started talking about decoupling. That is dangerous because that affects the rest of the world more.
So may I have your perspective on the first few decades of independence, the first 10 or 15 years, the first 2 or 3 5-year plans? The reason why I ask that is that it seems to be fashionable in certain circles to criticize the Nehruvian model and say that that was what led to the license quota Raj and held us back. There is some suggestion in the last 5 or 10 years that if that model had not been followed, the Indian tiger would have been unleashed earlier. Your thoughts on the so-called license quota Raj in the first 2 or 3 5-year plans?
No, as I mentioned earlier, that when we launched on the strategy of development in the 1940s, and in the 1950s, we had no clear guidance either from theory or from practice. I think we were really groping for a new way of doing things. And therefore, we cannot find fault with the people, the policy makers of that time. I think this is quite clearly, you remember that when the government of India launched on the 5-year plans, the Bombay plan was prepared by the industrialists themselves. Therefore, the thinking was not simply in the minds of the government and the policy makers. There was a much wider acceptance of that strategy at that time. The question really is that after 3 decades of that strategy, whether we should have made some changes in the strategy. It is not a question about what they did in 1950s and 60s. That apparently is what was considered to be desirable, and at that particular time, no other alternative was not clearly seen. And then the argument that what South Korea did, we could not, why didn't we not do? that is again the problem of the size of the economy. South Korea can adopt a export-led strategy of development, but much more difficult for a country like India, which is such a wide thing. And in fact, you remember that the export pessimism also came because whatever we could produce, we could consume it within the country itself. I mean, we talk of what is the term used, exportable surplus. That is, you produce, then domestically consume, and you produce more than what you domestically consume, then you export. But that was not the case at that particular time. Therefore, one has to be cautious about criticizing that particular period, because there was, we cannot criticize something by hindsight. I mean, I think that is not the way to look at the problem. But there is, however, a view that by 1970s we could have changed. We could have modified the system. And whether in comparison to China, where we are 1 decade late as far as the reforms are introduced. And the Chinese also in those days, I think Deng's days, used the word social marketing and so on and so forth, because they really moved towards a modified system. And whether we could have done that at that particular time is a question.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, sir. I think in the interest of time, yeah, we are quite late for sir also. Sorry, we'll take it offline if possible. Okay. Yeah, very late. Thank you so much. Sujita, over to you.
Now our President, Rotarian Ramakumar, will gift a small token of appreciation for having spent his valuable time with us this evening. After a long day that we met him in the morning, I'm sure he is ready to go home also. We'll have the Secretary's announcements.
Friends, good evening. I have a few announcements. 22nd March, the meeting we have, it's an induction, new member induction meeting. We have 3 inductions that day. So that's going to be interesting. The 29th of March is an international night. So we'll be having the Consulate General of the US, UK and Germany. And they will be participating with us, and that is going to be yet another interesting evening. And 5th of April is our district governor visit, a very important event. On the same day, we have the Project Gati, so where we will be donating 24 mobility aid devices to Vidyasagar, and also we need all your participation in funding the project. So those are deserving children. So look forward to all of you, all members come forward and donate for that. One more important announcement is 19th of April we have the Vocational Excellence Award, and tomorrow I'll be sending you the email for requesting you for the nominations. So please do send the nomination for the award. 27th of this month is the last day for sending your nominations. Thank you.
Over to Rotarian Vivek Sayal for the vote of thanks.
On behalf of the Rotary Club of Madras East and everyone present here, I would like to sincerely thank Dr. Rangarajan for spending his time with us and sharing valuable insights. Being a fellow banker myself, I can certainly say that India has a very robust financial system, thanks to great governors like yourself. I'd like to thank a few members from the Rotary Club. Mahesh for connecting us with Dr. Rangarajan. R. Venkatakrishnan for his guidance as chairman of the Power Speaker Series. Divya and Rajesh for hospitality. Poonam and team Programs Committee. Sujita Arvind, Club Services Director. President and Secretary, of course, RCME. Archana Deche. Thank you so much.
May we all raise for the national anthem, please.
This meeting of Rotary Club of Madras East is adjourned.